Every single day we wake up and we get the opportunity to start something new. We have the potential as humans to make a difference. Everything we do, when you touch housing, Shiv, you realize that we touch people's lives. We are managing homes where they are raising their families, where some of the best times in somebody's lives and some of the hardest happen in those walls.
At 18, Melanie French left college to lease apartments for $700 a month, a choice that shocked her father, but ignited a passion for transforming empty units into homes where life's biggest moments unfold. Now the CEO of RR Living, she oversees homes for over 30,000 residents and believes that everyone, regardless of rent, deserves a home they can share with pride. Through weekly huddles with 500 team members and an eye for unlocking hidden talent, she's proving that in housing, the greatest amenity is humanity.
I actually quit college and go into multifamily full-time, much to my father's chagrin. I went and told him, Daddy, I'm so excited. I've got this job. It's going to be awesome. He says, okay, what about college? I don't need college. I'm going to make $700 a month leasing apartments.
A lot of people definitely wouldn't have taken the risk to drop out of college and do that. Have you always been a risk taker and just somebody who says yes to life?
I've been a risk taker to some extent. I'm not going to go jump off a bridge, but...
Melanie, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I am so excited to be here and be able to speak with you.
Yeah, I am too. Thank you so much for taking the time. So I want to start with your early years, before property management, before entering the workforce. What was Melanie like in her earliest of years?
Oh, wow. Melanie, myself, was actually always a person that loved being around other people and enjoyed trying new things, I would say. So as so many kids do, you play sports, basketball, run track, do those things. Younger years, even doing the Girl Scouts. And then doing Girls State, which got me into, say, some of the legislature of Mississippi and learning those aspects. I also, throughout high school, did some public speaking and loved it, but it was really about the people you meet. And, Shiv, I grew up in a family in Mississippi, and we had a very close-knit family. One of those families where every birthday, every holiday, everybody is together. So you learn from an early age that how you surround yourself with your tribe will help you to grow, will help you to learn, and to really be the best you can. And I think my parents instilled that in me.
Do you have any siblings?
I do. I have a sister and I had a brother who passed away some time ago, but it was the three of us. I was the oldest, and my father was, I'd call him a traveling salesman. So he actually sold large veterinarian supply, tools, I guess you could say. And so he was gone. He traveled every Monday, came back on Fridays, and I would talk to him every evening. He would still call, go over my spelling words with me. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, so I kind of had the best of both worlds, learning about business from my father and learning the importance of family from my mother.
So when you say you guys were a very close family, what does that look like in practice? Did you have dinner every day together?
That's a great question because, now people do think of it like that. And then I didn't think of it like that. I couldn't tell you if we had dinner every day together, but yes, we pretty much did. Our family was one where my mother has always been a risk taker and one of those fun-loving people. So to give you some insight into her, and probably one of the reasons I love to laugh, one year I can remember I was in 5th grade. My mother comes to pick us up at school, my brother and I, and she has this humongous wrapped present on top of the car. Well, of course, I was horrified because it's quite embarrassing to see your mother come driving around, smoking out the way and all this package. Oh, Lord have mercy. It turned out that it was a ping pong table for Christmas. But for
In
at
the
least
car.
2 weeks, no, on top of the car.
On top of the car, okay.
Yes, big red bow and everything.
Wow.
But for like 2 weeks, it was the most embarrassing thing in the world to me at that age. So I'd say I had a pretty fun childhood. I had a childhood where my father called one day, told me he met Miss America, was bringing her home to meet me. I was so excited, probably 9 years old. And he gets home, and it's a Miss America Barbie doll, Marianne Mobley at that time, and he found her on the side of the road and stopped and picked her up. And so, yeah, I learned very early on how to laugh and how to make that a part of daily life.
That's so funny you bring up this story of your mom picking you up from school. Because I remember being a kid. I feel like this is a common thing that kids get really embarrassed. Because I remember it being a big deal. Like my mom would come in this like old van and like old school and play loud Bollywood music.
Yes.
And I'd be like, I don't want anybody to see me here. So that's so funny that that's like a common thing that kids are kind of embarrassed about.
Yeah, and today it's so different because you have all of the technology. So the kids see so much as they're growing up that we weren't privy to. Back then, the television shows we watched were very different than what they are. We pretty much had 3 television stations until I was in probably high school. And I remember when MTV started, and my mother thought that was just the worst show ever. And, I look at it now compared to what's on, and life has definitely changed.
Yeah, totally. So, okay, cool. So you learned business from your father.
I did.
Your mother was a stay-at-home mom. Anybody else, whether it's teachers or others that were influences in your life?
My grandmother. My grandmother, we called her Mother Ann. Her name was Anna Laurie, and that's my mom's mother. And she was always the matriarch of our family and held our larger family together just by being the epitome of the woman that you would admire. The woman that was always well together. I thought it was so special to be able to spend the night at her house. And her house was the family gathering spot for all of my mother and her 3 brothers and sisters and all the kids. And, so we grew up having one big Christmas every year at her house that probably had 50 people because it was all the family. And even having just the larger family gatherings to meet people that you didn't know. But I would say my grandmother, she was the one that always had the most sage advice and that I looked up to as a professional, but just a classy lady.
That's a great way to describe her. Were you a good student?
I was. I was a good student in that, hey, I did make honor roll. I wouldn't say I was a great student. I did not necessarily study as much as I probably should have. But yeah, always I graduated with honors, was very good in that aspect, enjoyed school, and loved to learn. And even today, I still love to learn. I try my best to learn something new every day and to learn from the people that work with me and for me and that I meet along the way, because I cannot imagine what life would be if you just stay status quo.
100%. And it's so funny you bring that up because I was listening to a podcast yesterday and there was this line that really stuck with me. And the host said that the best people in the world go to school on everyone, which basically means you go to school whether you're sitting in an Uber and you're chatting with the Uber driver or you're waiting in line or you're at the airport.
Right.
Like you can learn from everybody. And I think for me, that's part of the reason why I started this podcast is like I'm so curious and I just love to learn. And I think the best people in the world do that all the time. And it's just an insatiable curiosity that they have to fill.
So have you always had that curiosity and you've always had that thirst for learning and finding out more?
I always have. Yeah. I
great.
remember like my mom and my friends at school would make fun of me because I just like asked so many questions. And for me, it was just like, it was the only way, and they would just come up in my head just naturally. And I was just so curious. And I think over time, the questions and the quality of the questions have probably evolved. But I think it's just an innate like trait. Because I remember ever since I was like young, my mom would like be like, oh, you ask so many questions. You're so curious. And yeah, I don't know if it's like a learned thing. I feel like it's probably innate, but.
Yeah, I would imagine it is. And because when you have that curiosity when you're young. Think about it. As a young toddler, you're so short that everything you see is at eye level. And so a lot of times when I meet a young child, I'll get down on their level because they see things so differently. And at that point, they're seeing everybody's knees while we're looking at people's heads. So I can only imagine that as toddlers and as young kids, that thirst for learning and trying to understand when you can't verbalize what you want to know, it has to turn into an innate learning opportunity as you get older.
That's a good way to put it. So you grew up in Mississippi.
Yep.
When did you move out of Mississippi?
I moved out of Mississippi. Let's see, I actually was born in Houston, Texas, but moved to Mississippi in first grade. And I left there after high school when I got into multifamily and took a promotion in New Orleans.
So let's hear the story of how you got into multifamily.
Okay. During high school and even when I was starting out in college, I worked at a pharmacy. A wonderful gentleman. I learned so much business-wise from him, even small things, Shiv. Like I can remember that he would have notes behind his pedestal where he sat and would fill the prescriptions. And he would have notes that described the customers so that when they walked in the door, which was further back, he could call out and say hello to them and know their name. So he had all these little points of memory. I took that and learned from that. But what happened was then that as working as a customer service and rep for him and driving to drop off prescriptions, I met a lady who was coming in getting her prescriptions filled. And she came and approached me and said, "Hey, I run apartments and you are always so friendly and outgoing. I would love to see if you'd like to come work for me." And that was how I first got into multifamily. Was I decided to do that on the weekends as a leasing consultant and to learn that while I was going to college. Well, not long thereafter, I actually quit college and to go into multifamily full time, much to my father's chagrin. I can remember I went and told him, "Daddy, I'm so excited. I've got this job. It's going to be awesome." He says, "Okay, what about college?" "I don't need college. I'm going to make $700 a month leasing apartments." And that was the start of my career.
It's so cool how all you need is one person to believe in you in the early days. And it's incredible to think of how your entire life, maybe you who knows if that person asked you to get into healthcare. Maybe you would have gone into healthcare and your whole industry would have changed. It's incredible.
Well, initially I was going to go to school and become a pharmacist. And I have to say that there was another plan somewhere because it has worked out well for me. And I've been very fortunate to be in multifamily where everything we do, when you touch housing, Shiv, you realize that we touch people's lives. We are managing homes where they are raising their families, where some of the best times in somebody's lives and some of the hardest happen in those walls. And I take that very seriously to take care of our residents because of that.
One thing that I'm noticing with you is you do have a very positive, jovial energy, right? I think anybody who knows you will probably say the same thing. Now, I'm trying to play myself back, when you were asked to kind of, from this person at the pharmacy to join multifamily, a lot of people wouldn't have taken that risk. And then two, definitely wouldn't have taken the risk to drop out of college and do that. Have you always been a risk taker and just somebody who says yes to life?
I try to say yes to life and to make decisions based on what I know at that time, because it doesn't matter what we're doing. I look at life as today is the first day of the rest of my life. Every single day I look at that. So every single day we wake up and we get the opportunity to reset if you need to, or to start something new. We have the potential as humans to make a difference. And I try very hard to do something positive every single day for somebody that doesn't expect it. And that's just part of my personal mantra, I guess, is do better for others than anybody would have ever done for you. And if we all did that in the world today, then we would have a better place. But yeah, I've been a risk taker to some extent. I'm not going to go jump off a bridge, but to other extent, yeah, absolutely. I looked at life at that point. I had just turned 18. In fact, I turned 18 the week before I started in multifamily. So I didn't know what I didn't know. What I did know was that there was a huge world out there, and this was something I had not done before. And what happened if I didn't try it? I could have missed out on something great. And the worst thing that could have happened wouldn't have been successful. And okay, you can live with that. I always had the feeling of knowing that my family would support me no matter what. And even after I got married, I still have that with my husband. So it takes the risk of risk-taking out of it because I'm not afraid to fail. Because if I fail, one more step and I've learned something.
I totally agree. I think most people, something I've come to realize is I think most people overestimate risk and underestimate reward. And I think that's largely because as humans, we're designed to survive. So we have to assess risk. But I think the mode, like the risk assessment, like what is actually risky has changed from 500 years ago, right?
Oh, definitely.
And I think like, I think about what you say and I realize like there are so many people out there that are so talented, that are so smart, that are overestimating how risky something is. Because the reality is, you know, many people don't come from a super wealthy background or anything like that. But if the worst case is that you can go back to your parents' house and move in and like buffer for a year or two, like what is the downside of not taking that risk, right? Like what are you missing out, like you said?
And you were so correct in that. I mean, you know, you've heard that adage all through life about four-letter words being the bad thing. Well, think about it like this. The word fear is 4 letters. The word risk is 4 letters. So you have to step outside of that to become the best that you can be. The word reward is 6 letters. There's a reason that reward has more letters in it than fear and risk. It's because the reward is a greater outcome, or at least that's the way I choose to believe it, is if you want something great, you have to go out after it, not wait for it to come to you.
Yeah, I like that actually. That's pretty funny. Have you always been a pretty grateful person? Because I feel like what I've realized is like it's almost impossible for unhappiness to exist while being grateful.
Ooh.
Like, if you're grateful, how does like unhappiness exist? And it feels like just from talking to you and getting to know you, it seems like you're a pretty grateful person.
I am. I am very grateful for everything I've ever had. And I realized I didn't come from a wealthy family. So for me, one of the catalysts to college was that I did not have a full scholarship. And it would have probably been hard for my parents to have paid for that. And I would not have wanted them to. So yes, while I was going to college and I was bound and determined, I'm going to make this, it's going to work out, it'll be all great. At the end of the day, you have to follow where your heart leads. And when there comes gratefulness, there always has to come grace as well. And I think sometimes people are so fearful of taking that step, that risk, that they don't give themselves grace and they don't realize what could be out there. So if the worst thing that ever happens to me in life is that I fail at something, then so be it. Because in the real scheme of things, there are people out there that have lost people they love. There are people that have lost their whole home, every memory they have, whether it was in a flood or one of the storms or a fire, they lose everything. So when it comes down to the simple day-to-day life that we live and the choices we make, at the end of the day, if we fail, but you've still got those people around you that you love, you've still got the memories, you've still got the opportunities, then failure's not so bad.
You mentioned that you didn't grow up with a lot of money. Mm-hmm. How much was money a driver in the early days? And then how much is money a driver today? Has that changed at all?
No. Come to think of it, I haven't ever really thought of it like that. I don't make decisions based on money. I don't choose which position I take based on money. I do expect to be paid a fair wage, and I do expect to be paid for the work I do and to be able to live on those wages. But to say, yes, I'm going to go take a job that I might hate because of money, I'll never do that. It's just not who I am. My parents worked hard for what they had, and we had a lot of values in our life and a lot of experiences that we may not have had money, but those experiences shape who you are. Something as simple as, because my father did travel with his work, we would travel with him during the summers. So, I have visited all but about 3 states because while my father was out traveling and driving, he would take the 3 kids and my mom, and we would go with him. We'd stay in the hotel. We'd go see sights. We made certain that if we went and saw the Natural Bridge or if there was some beautiful part of the country, we would do that. And those experiences were important. At the same time, because money wasn't as free-flowing as it might have been for other folks, I also knew that my mother kept a list at Christmas, for example, and she would write down what she got each of us, and she always made sure that she got the same number of presents and pretty much the same dollar amount. But you wouldn't have known that then because it was about love, and it was about being happy and having family.
What was the driver for you then in the early days? And even now, what does drive you?
I'm self-motivated. I like a good challenge, and I want to be the best. Not because I have to be, but I want to push myself to be the best I can absolutely be. And I think there's another driver for me that is important. I love watching people that I get to meet, watching them be able to see that light bulb goes off when they realize that there's something they just accomplished that they did not know they could. Or when you can see somebody working with you, Shiv, that you think, oh my goodness, this person will be fantastic doing this. And you go to them and say, hey, here's the vision I have. Have you ever thought about this? And they say no. And then they come back 3 or 4 years later and are like, Melanie, this is my passion. How did you know? I love watching that success of other people.
Are you pretty intuitive, do you feel?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say I am. Some people call it gut instinct. Some call it that natural ability to just perceive. I think it ties into empathy, the ability to hear what someone is saying much more than the words they're using, because it is so prevalent in today's world when you're on Zoom calls or you're on Teams calls and everybody we're talking to each other through boxes, okay? And I do worry about some of the young people coming up because of that, because how do you actually see the facial expressions and the facial recognition when that light bulb goes off? All of those pieces are very important in business. And it doesn't matter if you're in healthcare, if you're in multifamily, that ability to communicate is part of where success comes in. And if you can't communicate in today's world, if you're not able to communicate with the people around you, you're not able to communicate both upwards and downwards, then you very likely will not have the most robust career that you could.
Something I get out of you while talking to you and just my intuition and your examples tells me that you're really good at getting people to do more than what they thought they could do, right? Or inspiring them to do more than they thought they could do. That's something that I struggle with, or I don't know how to do. Like, what advice would you give to leaders and myself on how do you unlock more potential in somebody without them feeling like you're just saying that to like get them to work more? Like, do you have any advice there?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is forget about working more. And I would tell you to take work out of it. Work is another 4-letter word, okay? And with that, yes, you can work, but it really is more about living. And so what I would say to you, Shiv, if it's trying to unlock the potential of others. It is to communicate, to have conversations, to ask somebody, what is it you enjoy? Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? And something that anytime I do, for example, a performance review, I'm going to talk to the people that I'm working with, and I want to know from them, what is it that I'm doing and managing and leading you that you like? Or what is it that you would like for me to do differently? Because I know that I can always be better based on those conversations. So when you ask, how do you help people become the best that they can be? It starts off by the simple communications and by watching and recognizing when somebody does something well or when they come up with an idea. And to them, maybe it's just an idea and they're taking initiative. But I look for the light bulb. Is it something they're going to love? Is it something they came up with because it's an innate passion for them that they don't even know is unlocked? I mean, you think about it. Kids grow up with parents telling them, you do this, you do that. Then you go through school. Yes, you have to pass these tests. Yes, you have to graduate. Then you go to the next step. Everything is always pre-planned to some extent. So when you're able to have that, just that normal, true human conversation, that's when you find out the most about people. When their guard's down, when they're not trying to be the professional of their role. They're trying to just be them. And that really is what it's about. And to watch that light bulb go off, Shiv, once you see it the first time, you will want to watch it on everybody.
So what are some examples of, like, I guess, throughout your career where you've seen that light bulb and the transitions?
Let's see. I can remember hiring a young lady who had worked in the hotel industry, and she was a salesperson on the hotel side. And very bright, great young woman. I hired her in to do a sales and marketing role for probably 15 or 20 properties. Well, she got into doing that and did very well at it. But at some point, what I realized was that she gravitated to helping people, and people gravitated to her. They would call her and ask questions. Hey, how about this? Do you know how to use this software? Do you know this? What I realized was that she had the ability to not only train, but to be able to guide people and to do it very well. At the end of the day, she ended up going on and becoming a VP and learning and organizational development, and then went on and owned her own business. And it was all tied back to her unleashing that power of touching others and guiding them and training them. So something as simple as being a trainer. You know, I can remember there's been 2 or 3 service technicians who started, one of them as a grounds person, others in the service field, which has changed dramatically over the last 30 years. But seeing their ability and willingness to come in and say, lease an apartment when they didn't have to, and their ability to take care of the customers. Well, in the end, I put them into a property manager's role, and they did very well. And one of them now is a VP with someone overseeing property operations. So it all starts with those conversations and in paying attention to those around you.
One more thing you mentioned is it's important to communicate upwards and downwards. So you're the CEO of RR Living. What advice would you give to people to effectively communicate upwards?
There is a piece of advice I'll get, and I keep trying to take it myself, which is the elevator speech. I do believe that is important, and I'm still challenged to this day at giving more verbiage than less when I could probably give less. But that would be it. And I think really the most important is when you walk in that room and you're there, you're sitting in a boardroom or you're sitting there with the C-levels for the first time, own the space you're taking up and be confident in yourself, because nobody in that room knows you better than you do, and nobody knows what you're going to say or what you've been working on better than you do. So own that, have that confidence, speak with that confidence, and that carries weight in itself when you're communicating upward. I've met people who are afraid of sharing bad news sometimes. And I get that. It's not fun to share. When I make a mistake, it's not fun to have to go above me and say, hey, this is what I did, and here's what the outcome is, and I'm really sorry. But it's necessary. And in having that kind of transparency and communicating upward, I feel is very important. So if I had to say anything, I would say it's be authentic, be confident, and be transparent when you need to be.
So you started your career as a regional property manager. Now, after four decades, you are the CEO of a property management company. How does one effectively rise through the ranks that way? And I think just as a preface, like, this is why this industry to me is so special, is you can come in without an education, without a background, without any skill sets, and through hard work, through perseverance, through building the right relationships, can like rise through the ranks. There's nothing that's stopping you. Within the American dream, it's the multifamily dream.
Yes.
Like, what advice would you have for future leaders that are just starting out their career, 5 years into their career? How would they effectively navigate that path?
Take the risk. Always ask for more responsibility, and take the initiative to take more responsibility. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. I started out actually as a weekend leasing consultant, and then went into full-time leasing, then assistant manager, then manager, and then regional. So I was lucky in the fact that I had a regional at Johnstown American that believed in me, and I was willing and able to work hard. So a lot of those first years, I probably worked harder than most because I wanted to accomplish and I wanted to be the best I could. So I never saw no in front of me. I was always pushing hard, working long hours, taking that next step, and really trying to learn from everybody I met. And that paid off for me. It could have gone very differently. But at the end of the day, somewhere along the line, I fell in love with multifamily. I fell in love with the fact that multifamily is a career where if you're working on a community, you are doing something different every single day. You're not going in an office and doing the same rote work every day. There is always something different. And you're meeting people, and you're affecting people's lives just by doing your job every day. And when you really think about that, if you've ever gone, I don't know if you've ever touched on anything in, say, the subsidized housing with the Section 8 or any of the certificates and vouchers, but I can remember early on taking on some tough properties and not knowing what to expect. We would walk the apartment homes, and I always found it very interesting that on those Section 8 communities I had, because back then you had entire communities because the programs were different. And those families may not have a lot of furniture. They may only have a few pieces of clothes that were hanging in their closets. But what they did have many times was a sense of family value. And you could see that in signs hanging on the walls. You could see a family Quran or a family Bible or any of those things and the rules written down. When I went into the A assets, by comparison, the residents there tended to be much more materialistic. And you would see, say, nice furniture, nice clothes, all these different things. What that told me was that every person we meet deserves to have a home that is well kept, a community where they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, and a home where they're proud to bring their family and friends to. Whether they pay $0, whether they pay $1,000, or whether they pay $10,000 a month. That need is the same for a clean, well-kept, well-managed home where you can be proud to raise your family and have people come in. And that's what I've always tried to do.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking about how, this is potentially one of the most important industries because we are essentially responsible for shepherding like a third, a fourth, half of somebody's salary, their income. They're giving, this building, this company, half of their income, a third of their income. And now it's our duty to make sure that like we're creating the best possible living environment and experience. Because a lot of our well-being, I know for me, for the longest time, I was only until earlier this year, I got my own apartment. For the previous 3 years, I was shuffling between Airbnbs and moving from San Francisco to LA to sharing a room. And it was just so destabilizing, right? Because I didn't feel like I had any stability. I didn't come back. I didn't decorate my apartment. And having moved into my own place for the first time ever, it is such a different sense of just stability, right? And as you were talking about that, it made me think of, all the people, whether it's Section 8, affordable, A-class, like we have the duty to influence that experience of stability because it is a big part of your mental well-being.
Yes, absolutely. And if you think about it with children, say, the first most formative years of their lives are those early years, they say. And I have met so many wonderful people in multifamily. So when I became pregnant with my daughter, the first gift I ever received was from a resident of all things, and so those are the relationships that you're touching people's lives and you don't even know you are. And many times in our industry, you'll see that some of your residents will bake things for the service technicians or for the service team. And it's those little thank yous that matter. So when we run an apartment community, let's say you have 300 units. If you have 300 units, then you really probably have 12 to 1,500 residents. And you are essentially in charge of a small city. I say that, or a small town, because anything that can happen in a town or a county or a city will happen in an apartment community. You have fire, you have flood, you have people injured. You can have some communities have the drive-by shootings you hear so much now. And all of those things, good or bad. You also have many great things where kids will meet and make friendships with people that they may know for the next 30 years because that's what that sense of community is. So for me, one of the things that we've tried to build at RR Living was the fact that it is a choice for you to choose where you live. And we want to provide a community that not only touches people's physical needs for their home, but also gives them that opportunity to meet others and to have something that becomes a stabilizing focal point for them for years. So when we take care of these communities and these residents, we're taking care of someone's mother, their sister, their brother. We're taking care of the heat for Mrs. Jones, for example. If we don't fix Mrs. Jones' heat and it's 20 degrees outside, Mrs. Jones can have health issues or even worse. So what we do every day in some cases could be life or death for some of these residents. It's not just go to a job, sell them a candy bar, and then go home. We're taking care of them, their lives, where they raise their family, where they may propose, where they do all of these parts of their life. And when you really think about it and you think back to your memories, your most core memories that are the most exciting, you can likely tell yourself exactly where you were at that time. And that's important. You go back and you look at old family photos of you as a kid at a birthday party, and you're able to say, oh yeah, that's when we lived there. All of those things touch. There was once a community I had in Virginia, and the community was built in the 40s. And I can remember it had a lot of work it needed, but what it also had was heart. And there were residents that were coming to live there that were second and third generation of people living in that community. Because they grew up there, they came back with their kids. You don't see as much of that in the South, Now, in the Northeast, you have in Boston and Pennsylvania and New York, you have people that have lived in their apartment for years and years. You can say it's because of rent control. Nah, not really. It's because they're comfortable there and they consider it theirs. Just like now, you're nesting in your first home. You're turning it into yours. And it will forever be your first apartment. And you'll remember it 20 years from now. And if that experience is a bad one because you have a flood that nobody takes care of, or you have something happen and the maintenance does not get taken care of, then that memory is going to be marred. And we don't want that. I want you to have great memories so you refer people to me years from now and all of your memories are great.
That's incredible. There's a couple things that come to mind. It's clear that you're so mission driven. Like, how many leaders in this industry do you feel like are mission driven?
Oh, probably most. I don't think anybody ever grows up and says, I want to work in the apartment industry. I never even knew there was an apartment industry. But I think that to really do well in this facet of our career, you have to have something greater than yourselves and be shooting towards something else. One of the groups that I work with is called Entryway, and I don't know if you've ever done anything with Entryway. At one point, it was called Shelters to Shutters. But what Entryway does, and it was started by Chris Finley, also in this industry, of course, but Entryway takes people that are situationally homeless, gives them training, and then places them in a position to be able to interview with companies like mine, with companies like yours, or other multifamily companies. And then when I hire somebody from this program, whether it's as a grounds person, a leasing person, a service person, we agree to give them a discount on their apartment and to pay them a wage. What they're doing is they're coming to work for us and have that opportunity to build their career from that day forward, regardless of how they ended up homeless, because so many people only need that chance. And I love Entryway because it gives that chance. And so here you're taking someone like yourself. You had your first apartment, and we talked about how people raise families. Well, think about it like this with Entryway. You're a single parent with 2 kids. You don't know from day to day how you're going to feed your kids. You're sleeping in a car or you're sleeping in a shelter. All of a sudden, because of this group, you've been able to come and now you're going to have housing. Entryway works with Court Furniture, who then provides furnishings for that person's apartment. So now those 2 kids not only get to see their parent have this newfound pride and this newfound confidence level because they've got a job and they're earning money. But that child now has somewhere to do their homework every day. They have somewhere that they know they'll have a hot meal 2 or 3 times a day. That changes that child's life forever. And those are the opportunities in multifamily. So I think they're probably many more mission-driven than we know.
That's super inspiring. How do you, you're so dedicated to your work. What do you make time for outside of work?
Mostly more work. But no, actually, it's a great question. I'm probably not the norm in some of that, in the fact that I actually live in Jacksonville, Florida. That's where my husband is, retired Coast Guard. And yet I have an apartment in Dallas, and I took this position with RR Living and Reef Holdings because I believe so strongly in what Reef stands for. And I rented an apartment in Dallas. So now I'm in Dallas 90% of the time, and I go back home and see my husband, or he comes and sees me. So for me, yes, it's about work, but it's about leaving the world a better place than I found it. And it's about helping those that work with me and for me to grow into their own, because those are our future leaders. And I have a responsibility to help build those leaders of tomorrow. And I take that very seriously. And I'm lucky I have a husband who tolerates it greatly.
How did you meet your husband?
Through the apartments. I was managing an apartment community down in Long Beach, Mississippi. He was in the Coast Guard, and he happened to be the housing officer. And so some of his some of his guys lived in the apartments, and we had a flood. And they were on a boat. So I had to call the Coast Guard station and tell them, I need to talk to whoever is in charge because all of their belongings are wet. And that was how I met him, was through a problem at work. And through that, we talked for a couple of years. I had a practice marriage before I ever went out with him the first time, and then went out with him, and we've been married for 37 or 38 years now.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about how have you seen the industry change over the last 4 decades, and where do you think it's headed? And you can answer that however you interpret.
Okay. Wow. I've seen so many things in the industry change, and yet then some of them have stayed the same. For what I mean by that is when I started in this industry in 1981, it was still, you had one person on the outside, one person on the inside per 100 units. That was the typical. So if you had a 200-unit community, you would have 2 on the service team and 2 on the office team. That was the general rule of thumb. Well, that has not changed a lot. Now, depending on the level of service that an owner wants to offer to the residents, it may be that you have 1 per 80, but still, it's in that same genre and range. So it really hasn't changed a lot. But what has changed is we've gone from everything happening manually and being done manually, even posting rent on the ledgers, because I remember the days when we took cash, and I would call the police department. They would come and follow us to the bank at night, because we had all this cash on 455 units. It was a lot, which is where I was the leasing and assistant. And so that has changed. Now, just like in all aspects of the United States, we've become a more technology-driven. In days past, when you got the credit report, so you ran the credit on your applicants, and you looked at it and you made the decisions. And we have really streamlined so much with technology. It's exciting to see. It does take a little bit of that knowledge base probably away from sometimes the people that work there, because I think now people get so accustomed to working with technology that maybe they don't ask the questions, which is always a good thing. You want to understand why. So instead of us going through and really evaluating somebody's credit, we now have a program that does it for us. We're now able to look at the backgrounds of individuals. We're able to communicate, and in a positive way and a negative. Now, because of technology, the number of reports that we ask our community teams for has grown tremendously. And yes, they have the ability to do them in the property management software. But the fact is, 25 years ago, if you wanted a large report or something, you sent an email, or not an email, but you would send a letter, or then it would be an email, but it was not this quick turnaround. Now, everybody sends everything electronically. So it is a lot easier for us as supervisors to say to someone, hey, I need this report and I need it tomorrow, without taking into account what that team on site is really doing. It is something we have to think about, I think, as an industry, is how do we not become so accustomed to asking for something with short deadlines when we're not thinking about the person we're asking it of. Because if you look at something as simple as packages, and the reason we try not to take packages on site is, you think about it, the UPS person comes in, they drop off a package, your leasing person has to sign, so you've got 2 minutes there that you're counting them. Well, then you take 2 minutes to go put it in the closet, and then later a resident calls and says, hey, did my package come? And that's another time. And then they come to pick it up, that's another time, and you sign it off. By the time the single package was done, somebody had touched it 7 times. And that 10 to 14 minutes it took time out of that day. So we found ways to save time for people, but we're also spending more time and asking them to do more. Yet, if we have somebody in our office now, they do not work on a time schedule like we do at a corporate office. I don't have the opportunity for 20 residents to walk in whenever they want to, and our site teams do. So that would be the biggest change, Shiv, is that I think we take some things for granted these days that probably make it harder for our community teams and our service teams than make it easy.
Is that why you think the ratio of on-site folks hasn't changed? You said that because even though there's more technology, there is now more work being created.
Yes.
So the work is expanding, and there's those hours are still being used for other things.
Yes, I do think that. I think that we continue to increase what that output that we want is. And part of that is, let's face it, the economy has been challenging. So there is that push of let's get more rent money. Let's get a higher retention rate. Let's really focus. We want to make sure everything's done. You know, when I first got in this business, you could have an apartment home painted, cleaned, and shampooed for $225. And now I can't get it painted for anywhere near that. I'm lucky if I can get it clean for that. So many things have changed, but yet so many have stayed the same. By staying the same, we're still providing housing. We're still providing the ability for someone to live somewhere they're proud of. But at the same time, we're increasing the workload. Whether it is, okay, because of fair housing, you have all of these rules. Because of insurance coverage, you're going to have these rules. Everybody is creating more work without taking work off of us. And I think that's one of the things that technology can help us with if we are open to it. When you look at a lot of our multifamily peers now, we are trying to find ways to centralize work in a lot of ways. Well, I can tell you when I was at Aimco for 15 years, we were centralizing already then, and that was 25 years ago. So we're still talking about some of the same things, and we're trying to take the administrative work off of the site teams, and that's because we realize the importance of the human factor. We realize the importance of someone wanting to enjoy where they live and of having exemplary customer service. We want that because if you do not have exemplary service right now, it's a matter of 2 clicks on the internet for somebody to leave you a bad review. And that's important in our industry, so we've got to adapt to it.
Where do you think AI tooling is going to come into play outside of what it is already helping with, right? Like we see AI in leasing, we see AI in rent collections. Like where do you think AI or technology is not being utilized where it should be to help on-site teams and to help corporate teams?
Mm-hmm. I would love to have us find a way for AI to help more in the maintenance and the service realm. And so much of what we do today is about trying to control cost. Okay, because you can't stop costs, you can't stop the increases. So it's about controlling it. And I think the one area of our business that has not really changed over 25 years is that service area and what the maintenance teams deal with. Because you still have to upkeep the buildings. You have upkeep of the apartment homes, of the breezeways, of the common interior hallways. All of those stay so busy, and there is so much to do. And that hasn't changed. I don't know how technology can really help it, but I'm hoping it can. You know, one of the things I've asked our teams to do is to put in a self-service maintenance closet so that the small things, say toilet paper holders or towel bars or light bulbs or batteries, residents can come up and get that whenever they want to, Shiv, and do that on their own. Because I don't think there's anybody out there that is saying, yes, I want a service person to come to my apartment. I can't wait. Okay, that's not real life. You want your home to be your domain. So nobody really wants anybody else in it. And I think that there's a way for us to make things simpler as we grow. The single-family home rental business has done a lot of that. When you look at build to rent, when you look at those single-family homes and all of those companies that have come up, they found ways to make it work for them where the maintenance service and what those teams do is very different in the single-family homes than it is in the apartment communities. So we still have to find ways to make that better. Is that a technology that pings the resident and says, hey, it's been 91 days since you changed your filter, please go do it? Maybe. Is it a way that we find one of the home warranty companies to come in and give me a warranty on apartments and the maintenance in it? I would love to see that. And I think that's a possibility because that is where we have to focus because right now our service team members are the hardest to fill and their rates of pay are going up. But this is a group of men and women that, Shiv, they are out in the heat of the sun in the summer. They may do 10, 12 air conditioner calls. That is a hard job. And they're going from inside to outside. We've got to find a way to make that easier.
Do you think on the AI side of things, like there's an opportunity to streamline on the maintenance side, like coordination of like scheduling,
yes,
dispatch and coordination? Is that like a very manual, mundane process right now?
I wouldn't say it's a mundane process because if you have an apartment community where you only have 2 communities in one city, you don't get the benefit of the economies of scale than if you had 15 communities. So I think that whenever you do have more communities in an area, sometimes those companies are able to scale and have different groups that go take care of it. So for example, I've recently started hiring people that are specialists in HVAC or specialists in plumbing because that's what that community needs, or that's where the biggest realm of cost from a maintenance side is. That's where we're seeing it. So we're trying to put resources in those areas versus hiring a generalist on the service side. And we've got to come up with some ways to do that, or I'm fear that our service teams are going to burn out and become a dying breed.
When we look at the next generation of leaders, what is 1 or 2 pieces of advice that you would want to leave them with?
Life is full of magic, and you're the key to opening that magic. So when you take the opportunity to jump at a chance to learn something new, go do it. Don't pass it up, because that could be the one single factor that will ensure your life is magical. That would be the first thing, is don't pass up opportunities out of fear. Take that risk. And the second thing that I would leave somebody with is that we have a choice every day. We have a choice to wake up and be happy and be excited about the life ahead of us, or we have the choice to wake up and dread it. But at the end of the day, it is a choice. So I can look at any bad thing that happens in my life, and I choose to find positive in it. And by choosing to find the positive in your own life and waking up and knowing that it's a great day, you're already halfway through the battle, because you've already had that one positive thing that day. I mean, it's just like the book about where they talk about it, go make your bed. You know, if you make your bed, you've done one thing. Well, the same thing. If you choose to be happy, you choose to look at the positive, then your life is headed in the right direction, and nobody can slow it down if you don't let them.
Melanie, I want to thank you for your time today. This has left me super inspired, more inspired about the industry, more inspired about the impact that we as a tech company can make. And I've never been in a conversation that actually has highlighted how much of an impact we actually have. And if you can do that to me in an hour, I can't imagine what you're doing to your team. So I really appreciate you taking the time and chatting with me.
Well, thank you so much. I have to tell you, my team inspires me. And every Tuesday, I do a weekly huddle with every team member on our team. And so all 500 are on the call for that 25 minutes. And I am inspired every week at what they're accomplishing. And That's the magic of our industry, is we touch lives. So next time when you go out and you're at your apartment and you're out on your patio or your balcony or your street and you're looking, remember that when you're doing technology, that patio or balcony is our residents' front yard or backyard. To a construction company, it's just a job site. But to us, it's their front yard and their backyard, and it's where they live. What more important thing can we do, Shiv, than touch people's housing and where they live and have their best memories?
Thank you.
Thank
you for being on.
This has been fun, and it's good to talk to you.
You too.